This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon.
I don't know quite what to call this month. It's August-September book club because, I don't know, August just got really busy, and it turns out I was not alone in being behind in my reading. So maybe I'll just call this Welcome to the September book club edition of the Thoughtful Travellers book club, where we are discussing Simon Reeve's Step by Step. Have you got the same edition this time?
I've even got the same cover. Yeah.
Snap! Yes. So, The Life in My Journeys. So, this was an awesome read, I thought. Justin, your overall thoughts. Let's start with your big impression.
I think I really liked it. I knew of Simon Reeve as a travel sort of guy from his TV shows. I didn't know that he was into his researching the terrorist groups, and he was a journalist and all that kind of stuff. And even even just his childhood, had no idea about that. But it didn't seem it was the easiest childhood either through his own choices and things like that.
Circumstances as well, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think, like I said, the book was kind of like there was the first bit with him growing up, and then also the whole political research and terrorist group stuff. And then we got into the travel stuff, which I think everyone was probably more familiar with. So, yeah, it kind of felt like two books. I like both parts, but I obviously enjoyed the travel part more.
Yeah, me too. I found it all fascinating, and I think the travel part was more meaningful knowing all the background, but it did read easier. And of course it helped that he was traveling through like the kinds of destinations that I think you and I both really love.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, I have surprisingly been to quite a few of the ones he's been to, especially the ones that were in like the Meet the Stands, and then a few of his other ones where they're not really countries, but I've been to a couple of those as well. So I kind of felt he did pretty good. I agreed with what he wrote about them, I guess. I felt the same kind of things when I was in those countries. So
yeah.
So it did bring back some good memories for myself as well.
Yeah, I was a bit jealous actually, because especially the stands, that's a part of the world I haven't got to yet. I had thought I'd be there sometime this year, but, alas, no.
Yeah.
But also he was there about the same time that I was living in Eastern Europe, and I think it's that kind of era, it's just enough post-Soviet that, a lot has changed, but not as much as has now changed. So it's kind of that really in between. Yeah. I mean, I noticed quite a few times he mentioned he spoke to people who said that they kind of pined for the Soviet era because life was simpler, and I don't know, it was more predictable. And that's experience I often had speaking to people when I was living in Slovakia and traveling around there, is that they actually missed the communist era.
Yeah, I've come across that a few times in places like that people, their life was simpler. And I mean, even in, say, something like Georgia as well, where you still see that life, but it's just not in the cities. It's just hustle and bustle of cities, and there's none of the old way of life going on anymore. So, but in the countryside, I think that's still there. But that's probably true of a lot of places around the world.
Yeah, I think so. While we're doing the broad brushstroke, I'm just going to read out Catherine's comment from earlier today on Facebook. I know it was actually Catherine who recommended this book for the Thoughtful Travellers Book Club. So thank you, Catherine. And she wrote, I adored this book. There's so much that informs Reeve's BBC travel logs, his brush with suicide at a young age, the way in which he fell into journalism and ended up, through sheer focus on his subject, the only person in the world who'd written a book on Al-Qaeda when those planes hit fatefully on 9/11. I mean, yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And the places that extraordinary stroke of luck, as it were, have taken him since. And this is the bit I like. Travel is about so much more than touring, and his book exemplifies this truism, I think. And I agree.
Yeah. No, I think so. It is quite astounding that an event that's probably changed the world so much, and yet it changed on a much smaller scale. It probably changed his life as well. Like, I don't think he ever thought that something like that would even happen, like the events of 9/11, but he knew all about Al-Qaeda and how they operated, and no one wanted to take him seriously that they had these capabilities. And all of a sudden, he got thrust into the limelight and became known. And then I think from there, it springboarded a career that I think if from memory in the book, he was a bit, do I want to do this or not? And then once he did it, he's gone, why haven't I been doing this before?
This is amazing. I want to keep doing this forever and ever. Yeah, it's a really kind of unusual twist and turns of events that led him there. But I think that's true of life in general. I really like some of his kind of like there's a few sort of philosophical moments and a few. Well, let me start with the one from the beginning, because as I work in travel, quite often I thought this was really true. It was when he was starting he was starting off the journey for the Equator series in Gabon, and they landed on like the kind of the beginning of the equator for their trip. And he said, there was no bunting. There is never any bunting. And I thought that was just such a good summary of what people think glamorous travel jobs are really like compared to reality. So there's amazing moments, but there's a lot of not amazing moments.
I think that was also a comment that we had later on in the book when he talked about was it the travel and not having any, you haven't travelled if you haven't any stories of squalor and filth. And so, and I think you can have the best intentions in the world to stay in like top class hotels, but as soon as you go out on the street, you're going to see something, or you're going to have that experience, and it's just like, you're going to tell it to people, and people are like, oh my God, I can't believe it was that bad. But it's just an experience, and it's acknowledging that the world is not as I don't know, like what we go through. We're very privileged, and it's the rest of the world is not necessarily like that.
Yes. In comparison, we live in a very pristine place, and we're very privileged to do so. And but yes, which country was it where they didn't end up staying in that person's house? Was it one of the sands, or
one of the sands?
Kyrgyzstan maybe, or anyway. But the descriptions were like, you wouldn't want to be eating dinner while you read those descriptions of the moldy sodden beds and cockroaches
and
fighting.
I think I've become really good at picking places these days, but every now and then I turn up at a place and it's like, I can't believe I've booked this. So
yep.
and then quickly get out of there.
Yeah. I think these days there's more chance of doing okay, but I think there's more reviews and stuff. I remember staying in a place in Taiwan once, and it was a hostel, and I loved Taiwan for many reasons, but not this particular hostel. And it had, a shared bathroom, but the shared bathroom was all flooded, and the flooding was not pretty. I mean, it was, just things like that. You just never know, but we stayed. Now the other things I was pleased to see, because I like, responsible travel and sustainable travel, and there was quite a few interesting mentions about that. I think it was in Gabon. He spoke with some people about that whole the wildlife. I think, I'll read the quote. It was, if you want us to stop hunting the wildlife, someone needs to provide us with an alternative means of putting food on the table. And then later in Kenya, he talked about the necessity of tourism for wildlife conservation. We need to have people there as tourists so that there's money, so it's worth saving the wildlife, and things like that.
Yeah. And he also mentioned that very early in the book about evil corporations. Everyone goes on about evil corporations taking the land and for their mining and stuff, but he also was pointing out, you've got to understand that taking land off people for a good cause doesn't necessarily mean the locals like it either, because you're taking their lifeblood away from them if they can't have the land to farm and stuff. So that's, again, you need to provide ways for them to make it, have income and it's sustainable and looking after land and the animals. So
it's really tricky, isn't it? But and I think no one knows the right way to do it. But I think it's important that we discuss it and that people, highlight it. So I was pleased to see that kind of stuff in there as well. And obviously he's seen plenty of examples of that kind of in action. But I have to mention, while we're on the subject of the environmental part, because I read this and it shocked me, and I immediately went and Googled it and found out it wasn't true. Thank goodness. The Google search. So
yes,
he mentioned, without fact checking, let me tell you, every Google search uses the energy it would take to boil 2 cups of water, which alarmed me. But I went off and discovered that it was fake news. So it was published in, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Anyway, somewhere that should know better, but it was wrong. And so a Google search is okay, because I was thinking, oh my God, I make so many Google searches every day. What am I doing? I'm destroying the planet. But I mean, I'm still destroying the planet, just not that fast.
You've got to be realistic about it as well. Like, you're not going to you need to make changes that are easy to make changes for, and then we can work on the harder stuff. when we've got some better solutions. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Step by step, as he often said.
Yes, as is
the title. Yeah. All right. Now, I thought he also, and I know you agree, that there was a lot of things about like the benefits of travel and how travel had changed him. Have you got a favourite part describing that?
I mean, I think the one about there's 2, and one goes back to the beginning of the book, because it was kind of travel related in a way, was where he was sitting down with Benazir Bhutto, who was Prime Minister of Pakistan at the time, and very much a globally recognised world leader, and he was trying to let her know that she's still a blob of strawberry jam on her upper lip. And how do you tell someone with such high status in society that you need to get the strawberry jam off your lip? But that's just kind of, I guess, those kind of things, whether you don't really plan that, and it's just happens. So you meet every now and then, you might not meet someone as important as the Prime Minister of a country, but I think when I spoke to you about Bhutan, you came across people there that were quite important in the country, and you just had these fleeting, moments with them. And I've also read in a book, and I can't remember the book and who the author was, but she just sat on the train one day in Europe, and I think the Prince of Liechtenstein was on the train and sat next to her, and they had a conversation. So, just so things like that can happen. But then the other one that I liked was the Kazakh Beatles as well, where there's no way he was going to Kazakhstan to meet a Beatle a group,
a cover band impersonators,
Beatles cover band, but he did. And so just those experiences, like, you're not intending to have those experiences, but they happen, and they may not be as grand as meeting a prime minister and things like that, but nevertheless, you still have these interesting interactions with people that
the Kazakh Beatles
never
one
expect to have.
Yeah, exactly. The Kazakh Beatles one was quite lovely, because they described how they'd started to listen to the Beatles back in, Soviet era, when, they weren't supposed to have any copies of their music, and really inspired them. And now, of course, these days they could do it. And, I thought that was just awesome. So, you just never know, do you? If we're talking about pop culture, we can't not mention the Titanic, can we? The Kyrgyzstan Titanic. This tickled my fancy. So apparently there was a pirated copy of the Titanic movie, no less, not just actually playing it, but it was pirated. It had like a thing across the bottom, so you knew it was a pirated copy. And they were playing it every Saturday night on the only TV station in Kyrgyzstan for weeks and weeks. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I'm sure if the people who own the copyright to the movie knew, they'd probably say something. But it's Kyrgyzstan, and they
could get away with it.
Wasn't under the radar. Yeah.
I remember them mentioning that it was dubbed by a single voice. So, and I can't remember where it was. I think it was like Latvia or Lithuania or somewhere where I was traveling and watching TV, and it was the same thing. So, like, normally, like, when I was watching TV in Germany, they would be dubbed with lots of different voices, and it would sound really authentic. But I remember listening to that kind of monotone. It was somewhere like Latvia, and it was just this monotone voice repeating, standing in for every single character with this blah, 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 blah. And it was just so depressing to watch a show. And it was like something like Friends or something. It was just monotone, just voice. I was like, oh, there's no enjoyment watching this.
Although if there is a movie you know really well and you watch it and it's been dubbed, the voices are never the same. So, like, the English voice and the foreign voice, but they're never the same, and it's really difficult to watch. But it's still fascinating nonetheless.
It is a really weird thing. I always remember when I lived in Germany, because I lived in Slovakia and in Germany, I always watched German TV because we lived on, that's close to the border with Austria. So we got Austrian TV. And there was a few series that I only watched there first. So that I watched the dubbed versions first. And then later on back in Australia, I would see the original American versions. I was like, that's not what the voice should sound like. What's this? Yeah. This is ridiculous. So it just depends which you get first. So now, I also noticed that he was a man after my own heart by mentioning about how travel changes you. So I've got a couple of quotes I will share. Yeah. Like, he said, I realized traveling with your eyes open and looking for the dark as well as the light is a guaranteed way of having an experience that lingers in your soul. What do you think?
I think, and I think there's that makes a lot of sense. Like, and I think it even goes into how that whole thing of dark tourism's actually become a thing as well. Where
true.
You're not even looking at the light; you're just going straight for the dark, seedy stuff. That, I think you can't just. I think I tend to stumble on the dark more so than go looking for it.
Yes,
a lot of people probably stumble on that, and you kind of have those interactions where you feel like hopefully your life's not in danger or something like that. But nowadays there are like whole tourist events where it's touristy trips going to Chernobyl, for example, things like that. Things like this. In Japan, they go to that Fukushima and they get told off, but they still do it. So that's and looking for the seedier parts of town, where because you've heard the food there is great or something like that. So I think it happens. It depends on how much you go looking for it. But I mean, you hear about it all the time that people have enjoyed their time just as much when they found something that's possibly not as not going to be on the tourism board's preferred hit list for tourists when they come and visit the country.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I think if it was only all the quote unquote light, then that really could only be like a very kind of curated guided tour where you just hop on and off buses and go straight to the nice bits and that's all. And that to me sounds very fake.
Well, and that'll probably go on to, I suspect your next quote is the one about...
off the beaten track. Yes. Let me go.
Yes, go.
No. I love it. Okay, getting off the beaten track and learning more about the places we visit, both the light and shade, always makes for a more interesting experience, a more rounded adventure. I don't think travellers need to ignore darkness. I haven't been anywhere where people won't talk about issues or problems. For most people, it's cathartic to share with outsiders. This is interesting because I sometimes wonder, should I, could I, would I ask certain questions?
And it is a tough one because, in some places you just think you shouldn't ask questions about the government or things like that. But I think sometimes there's ways to ask general questions and you just kind of ask about, what's life like now? And you can get around the real tricky questions because you know that perhaps the current government's not going so well and maybe there's some issues, but you don't ask them that. You just ask them, so what's your life like? And I think you kind of try and lead them to open up and talk about it themselves, and then you kind of feel a bit more comfortable about it.
Yes, it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, I think what he says is right, that for most people they do want to talk about it, but, for example, they might need to trust you more first. I remember last time I was in Vietnam, we're in a small group tour and we had a local guide who really wanted to push the message that, it still is a really communist state and there's lots of issues there and that we don't, in the West, often don't recognise that. He just had said a couple of things over a couple of days and, we got to know each other better. And then I was like, okay, sat down with him one night at dinner and said, tell me more about all this, because he'd kind of been hinting that he wanted to talk about it, but, it was all a bit, hush-hush. And, and then because I think, we'd known each other a few days by then and, he could trust me, then he told me lots of stuff. I was like, oh, wow, that is really interesting to hear, but you wouldn't normally just strike up your first conversation with a Vietnamese local and get that kind of information.
Yeah, I think that's. I think generally, you start with the softer, easier topics, and you try. If you're really interested, you can always try and push it that way. And if they just don't want to talk about it, then
Yeah.
and often someone would say, "Oh, we're not allowed to talk about that." And
Yeah.
I'm not the sort of person to push it too far because you don't want to get them into trouble.
No, exactly.
Yourself into trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm definitely not a push it too far person either. That's absolutely right. Okay, I've got one more bit of this, this particular favourite topic of mine.
I like this one even better. Yeah.
And this is a biggish quote, but I just thought it sums up a lot of the things that I think and a lot of things that I think the Thoughtful Travel podcast stands for. So it's from Near the End, and he wrote, "More of us should try turning a break into a proper adventure with a healthy dose of purpose and meaning. It almost guarantees a lifetime of memories. Taking chances is often where the best memories are, and the richest rewards in life come from a bit of risk-taking. We can all benefit from pushing ourselves, our partners, friends, or family out of our respective comfort zones. On a holiday, that can be as simple as not wasting your life lying horizontal by a swimming pool." I mean, I've said this a billion times. Following yeah, no, it's perfect. I always say that. Follow a simple set of rules. Go to strange places, take chances, ask questions, do things that are exciting, eat strange foreign food, and dive into the culture of the world and embrace risk.
It is. And I think, and people always hear the word risk and like, oh, but I think you can mitigate and you can understand risk, and I don't think he was ever saying go to a war zone like he's been to. Although he obviously got a lot of value out of it, but that's not for everyone. But at the same time, going to a resort, and I met a few people over the years and they've been to Cuba, but a lot of the travel to Cuba, they go stay in these resorts and they don't even leave the resort. And
it's hardly Cuba, is it?
You've missed the best bit of Cuba, which was out of the resorts. So
exactly.
So yeah, it's and yes, Catherine's already said yes. No lazing around swimming pools.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm very happy to pop into a swimming pool at the end of a day out and cool off, and that's quite enjoyable. But the idea of I did try in Egypt, and I lasted a half a day, and and then I quickly figured out how I could avoid spending too much time days upon days at that pool. I love a good pool and a good cocktail in a pool, but not.
Yes. I think some people may be upset about it, but
I know, and this whole industry is completely based around it, but it's not for us.
And that's where all the money is to be made. That's where most travellers do. They go to a resort and stay there, and so I don't know what the percentage of people who go and travel go to a resort, but I imagine it's higher than people who go and meet people and eat food.
Well, it'd be interesting to see. So, this in this COVID year, for example, people from Perth, generally, a lot of people I know go to Bali once or twice a year, and they really just go there to spend the time by the pool. Obviously, they haven't been there, but they've been travelling around in WA, but not, there's not that many kind of go and sit by the pool kind of places. So does that mean they'll be starting to think differently about their travel after this, or will they just resort back to resorts? I don't know, but maybe things will change.
Yeah. I mean, I get weird looks all the time when I tell people where I'm going, so I'm kind of used to it.
I'm used to weird looks too.
Yeah.
I haven't even told you where we're going next week, but that's a story for another day.
Another day.
But yeah, I got weird looks from lots of people. All right. Now, Justin, I think there's probably a couple more things from your list that you might want to share. Oh, we've covered lots of them.
Although I do have one right at the end.
Yeah, I was just thinking that one. Yep, go for it.
And this one, and this just highlights the differences. So I think this is in, I can't remember where it was. It was in Africa, though, wasn't it, during his equator filming? And
yes, I can't remember now either.
And there was an exorcism going on, and they wanted to go film it. And their local fixer just kind of suggested that it might be better to find a way to lock their bedroom doors. And I liked it because to him, this is something that was very real, very dangerous, but to the traveller, we were fascinated by what's going on. And there might have been a different level of belief whether this exorcism was even real, but let's go see it anyway. It's surely going to be fun. But to the locals, it's dead serious stuff, and it's part of their culture and part of their life. And you just you don't do exorcisms just because they're a fun thing to do. You do them because I generally think it's going to
it's a serious
spirits out.
matter.
It's a serious thing,
right.
and a very scary thing. So
yeah.
I just love the comment like, oh, I think we should go lock our doors.
Yeah, go lock your doors instead. Yeah, let's not go film that. Or don't you go film that. Yeah, it's funny. It's that whole risk issue again, isn't it? And sometimes when we're in another country, our perception of risk is actually completely skewed, and things that we think are risky are not, and things that we think are really exciting and fun are actually the risky parts. So
That's
it's all about, talking to the locals and figuring it out and making sure we're not doing something crazy. So I think that's probably all the really exciting bits we wanted to share. Am I right, Justin?
I think so. I was going to say, though, there was a couple of people, Margaret and...
I was just going to say that too.
Yeah, surprisingly, there's quite a few people who hadn't actually seen any of his TV shows. So they're in for a treat if they can find them and watch them. So...
It's
always good when you find...
I don't know where to find them exactly, but I know there's lots of lots of individual episodes on YouTube. But Margaret, she's a librarian; she'll track them down. So
DVD or something like that in the system.
Margaret made a good comment. The positivity and resilience of some of the people he came across living in atrocious conditions were astounding and very inspiring. And I think that's often the case when we travel.
Yeah, I think I'm always astounded by the resilience and just even the resourcefulness of people when they've got no resources and they're still very resourceful. So
absolutely, we're super privileged, and I think that makes us lazy sometimes, doesn't it? So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but yes. The other speaking of lazy, no lazing around swimming pools. I've just caught up with all the comments. Right. Yes, you've been on top of this, Justin. I had not enough screens up tonight. All right, so that is pretty much what we wanted to say for Step by Step. Next month, well, I think this is going to spin out about 6 weeks. I think we are not capable of reading a book a month at the moment. Well, I'm not. Although I have read this one before, but I need to reread it. So Bill Bryson's
completely different
Down
cover.
Under. I'm not surprised.
There's another. Actually, I noticed. I think this is 20 years since it's been published as well.
Is it really? I didn't check. I read it.
Mine says 2000,
a long time ago that I read it, but this is a new edition. But I haven't checked.
Well, I probably read it around 2000. So
yeah, I read it early when it first came out. I think. Oh, really? So it's like a 20th anniversary edition book club.
Yeah. Mind you, I'm thinking of all the things that happened in 2000, which was like the Olympics, and I don't remember reading this book then. So I feel like this is something I read at high school, but it's not.
we're older than that, but yes. Sorry. But I do remember it as being really hilarious because I know the very first or early in the first chapter is when he describes how Australia is so careless that they lost a prime minister. And
yes.
I think that is good. Oh, Catherine says she read it before she emigrated 19 years ago. So that's impressive. Despite reading this, Catherine, you still decided that Australia was a sensible place to come.
Because,
I'm not sure.
And I think I mentioned this to you that he made the whole thing about so careless we lost the prime minister, but I can't imagine I would have loved to have heard what he would have said about the time when we were going for a prime minister a week type thing a few years ago, because there was a lot of jokes going around. Australians were, in one way, we were horrified at what was happening, but we were very happy to make some good jokes about our Prime Minister.
Yes,
Friday.
we did have a bit of a high turnover for a while there. I'm sure Bill Bryson would have had a good chuckle about that. So, anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading it again. I mean, I think because it harks back to kind of simpler times as well, in a sense. And I just remember it as being, pure entertainment. And it's always interesting to read what a foreigner thinks about my home country. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Well, I do remember vaguely what he said about Canberra, and I don't believe it's anywhere near the same now. But I like.
Was he not very complimentary about Canberra?
No. But Canberra was never complimentary. He wouldn't have been the only person in the world to have ever said what he said about Canberra. So
anyway, I look forward to rereading it. I haven't been there for 20 years, so it's probably
Well, I look forward to reading what he thought of it 20 years ago again, because I remember it was like, ooh, you're lucky I like your books, Bill, because I didn't like what you said about my city.
He was in Perth a few years back, and I didn't get to see him speak because, ironically, I was teaching a travel writing course that night, and it was part of a series. And I lost half my students that evening because they went to see Bill Bryson instead of me. which, you know,
Oh dear.
I can't really blame them. I mean, I was happy that
least you
some
know
of them
where
were
you
there.
stood in the pecking order. Yeah.
Yeah. At least I didn't have a completely empty class. I still had half of them. So I guess that's a compliment. But yes. So anyway, thank you very much, Justin, and everyone who's watching for joining us for the step-by-step version of the book club. Thank you, Catherine, who is, I know, now listening. So thank you for a great recommendation. Okay, she's just written, there's a line she's often repeated from Bill Bryson's book because of the town of Hay, and it's make hay while the sun shines. She's driven through Hay a couple of times and thought about it every time. Yes.
And ironically, I'll be driving through Hay in a few weeks' time myself. So
on your big trip.
now
Awesome.
I'll only be thinking about that line now.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
Hay.
Well, you think of us when you drive there, Justin.
I will.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and join us in about 5 or 6 weeks to chat about Bill Bryson's Down Under. Thank you very much, Justin. You're a good pal to come on and chat with me all these about book club every time. I owe you. It was
a pleasurable chat about a funny book that we've both read. So I think
and at least we've never had a difference of opinion enough to get to yell at each other about it. So far so good.
I think that works.
Yeah, maybe we need something controversial. We'll have to find something that we have a difference of opinion on next. And
no
on that note, I'm looking to try and figure out like kind of the first half of 2021's book club books. I'm trying to be a bit more organised because, it just pays to be organised. So any suggestions, throw them in the comments and I will put them on my list of books to consider. That's it. Thanks, Justin.
Excellent.
See you next month. Enjoy your road trip in between book clubs.
I will. Thank you very much. I'll be reading this book.
Yes, exactly. It's very appropriate for a Aussie road trip. So enjoy.
This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.